Okay, guys, we are now, this is the second part of 5.1. This is 5.1b. And in this, that doesn't look very pretty. In this, we are taking now our quadratics, and we're going to first find our x and y intercept. And the first thing is, the easiest thing to do is to find the y-intercept. In reality, all you're doing is you're placing 0 in for x, and what's left over, which is -2, that is your y-intercept. Also, what you can do is you can say, okay, what is my constant? Okay, my constant in this case is a -2, so that is my y-intercept. Either way you can look at it. Just be careful. Sometimes when there isn't a constant, we forget that there is still a y-intercept. It's just 0. Now we're going to do x-intercept. To do this, we need to try to factor. I'm going to do the a times c method. So I'm going to do a times c, which gives me -6x squared. I need to find a factor of -6x squared that when I add together give me 5x. Well, in this case, this isn't too difficult. This is just -x and 6x. Now I'm going to factor by grouping. 3x squared plus 6x minus x minus 2. Factor these. 3x squared plus 6x, look at those two. What do they have in common? They both have a 3x. So using with x plus 2. And then be careful on that end because there's a negative right here in front. I always pull out a negative. But the only thing that's common between x and 2 is 1. So instead of pulling out a positive 1, I'm going to pull out the -1, which leaves me with x plus 2. And let's remind ourselves, what's inside the parentheses has to be the same. So it gives us x plus 2. I'm going to cross those out, and that leaves me with 3x minus 1. Now those are my factors, but that does not give me my x-intercept. Let's remember our x-intercept is we set those equations equal to 0, and we solve them. Subtract 2 from both sides, so when x is -2, so we have 2 of them. So that means -2, 0, and 1/3, 0. And those are my x-intercepts. So we now are able to graph this if we wanted to, because we could go back, we could find our vertex, we could find we have our y-intercept, our x-intercepts. We can make a fairly decent graph with this knowledge. Now let's go into this one. And let's go and do our x and y-intercept. Okay, we're going to do our y-intercept first. I want to look through this. This has an x, this has an x, this does not. That is my constant, so that means 0, -4 is my y-intercept. Now, I could, if I wanted to, I could take out a 2. So let's rewrite this, 2x. So now we're going to find our y-intercept, which means we're going to set them equal to 0. Could, if I wanted to, I'm going to go ahead and divide everything by 2, which gives me x squared plus 2x minus 2 equals 0, because 0 divided by 2 is still 0. Does that really get me a whole lot further? No. And do you have to do it? No. This we take because as you're simplifying, that 2 would take care of itself, but it does allow me to start deal with smaller numbers. And in this case, my a is now 1, so I'm just looking at -2. What are my factors of -2 that would give me a +2? And in this case, there isn't any, because my factors will either be a -1 and a +2, or +1 and -2, and none of them, when I add them together, give me 2. So now I must use the quadratic formula. And this is what happens when you're dealing with smaller numbers. It makes it a whole lot nicer. So let's remind ourselves, what is a quadratic formula? -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We're going to fill it in. So a is 1, b is 2, and c is -2. So -2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 2 squared, minus 4 times 1 times -2, all over 2 times 1. And that a being 1 just makes it easier for us because we're dealing with smaller numbers. So what do we get? We get -2 plus or minus the square root. So 2 squared is 4. 4 times 1 is 4 times -2 gives me a -8, but now it's going to make that a positive. So I got 4 plus 8. We're just going to go ahead and make that 12 all over 2. Now, let's be careful. Some people will try to divide that 2 into this 12. Can't do it. But we can simplify that. This is the same as saying 4 times 3. And we can take the square root of 4, which is 2, but not 3, and 2. Okay, and that's nice. Now we have 2's everywhere. And this boils down to -1 plus or minus, this 2 goes to 1 again, square root of 3. And when we write this as x and y intercepts, we have a -1 plus square root of 3 comma 0, -1 minus square root of 3 comma 0. And those are our x-intercepts. Let's look at some application problems. Ball reaches a maximum height. So when and the maximum height, and when does the ball hit the ground? So let's think about this. We're looking at this. So this is t is our x-axis, and h is our y-axis. So to find the maximum height and when, so I'm looking for my max value, I'm going to use -b over 2a. So -b, which would give me -80 over 2a, which is -32. So now we're going to say, what is -80 divided by -32? Get out my calculator. 80 divided by 32 gives me 2.5. Now this is 2.5 seconds, because that is our x value. To find our height, we need to put -16 times 2.5 squared plus 80 times 2.5 plus 40. Now, see here, we're going to do -16 times 2.5 squared plus 80 times 2.5 plus 40. And in this case, the maximum height that I got is 140 feet. Now, I always find these interesting is that, flip-flopped them. So 2.5 seconds, 140 feet. Now, the question is, when does the ball hit the ground? So in this case, how this looks, let's take a look. Let's redraw this a little bit. Looks something like this. And we're looking for our other x-intercept. So we need to figure out what is my x-intercept for this. Well, first off, right off the bat, I'm going to see, could I divide everything by 16? Could divide this by 16. I can divide this by 80 by 16, but I can't divide 40 by 16. But let's see if I can get smaller numbers at least. Believe I can divide everything by 8. Again, you don't need to. But now I'm dealing with much smaller numbers. Makes it a whole lot nicer. And I can already see right off the bat that this will not work for that. So I'm going to have to do the quadratic formula. So again, dealing with smaller numbers makes things a lot easier. Negative 10 plus or minus the square root 10 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 5 all over 2 times negative 2. Now, if we're putting this into our calculator, I would highly, because we're going to get an actual answer, I would highly advise to do just the determinant first. So I'm going to do 10 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 5, which gives me, lo and behold, it gives me 140. Right now, let's see here. What else could I do? I'd really like to get rid of that 4 on the bottom, but I don't think I can. So now I'm going to take care of, someone say the square root. Oops. Now I want to type everything in. Negative 10 plus the square root of 140. Close that. And then I'm going to divide that by negative 4. Which in this case, if I did that, so if I did the plus portion, that gives me negative 0.045. Okay, well, it's time, so it doesn't work. We got to go back and do it again. We should have a positive form. So negative 10 minus, oops, messed up my calculator, minus the square root of 140. Then I'm going to divide that by negative 4. That gives me 5.4, we'll say 6. So when does the ball hit the ground? In 5.46 seconds. Let's see if we can do one more. I was going to do it really quickly. Max height, again, negative 96 over 2 times negative 16. So let's see here. This gives me 3. So when would be 3 seconds. Max height, so I'm going to put 3 into the equation. So let's see here, negative 16 times 3 squared plus 96 times 3 plus 112 gives me 256 feet. And when does the rock hit the ocean? So let's see here. Can I simplify everything by 16? So here, 96 I can, and 112 I can. So that's nice. Watch, this is what makes it really nice. So if I divide everything by 16, that gives me negative t squared plus, let's see here, what was that? 6. So this was 7. Then 96 divided by 16 gives me 6. 6t. Then here's a nice trick. If I divide everything by negative 16, that gives me t squared minus 6t minus 7. Don't need to do that, but it makes it a little bit easier because we usually deal with a as a positive. And I can go ahead and see that this would be t minus 7, t plus 1 as my factors. And again, we want the positive form. So if we set these equal to 0, this would be t is equal to 7 or negative 1. Well, if we're dealing with time, negatives don't work. So we have 7 seconds. Okay, that's part B.